Hello, everybody, and welcome to the November 14th, 2018 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. I am your host, Ephrom Josine. Anyway, yesterday's show was kind of hard, and to be fair, debunking the pro-life movement again when they make such hideous claims is always kind of hard. So, you know what? Let's do something simple. Let's make fun of John Stossel. I don't think we've ever really made fun of him. If you do not know, he is the guy who has probably the second most luxurious mustache out of the entire Republican Party. Is he a Republican? I'm pretty sure he's either a Republican or a Libertarian. I'm going to check. Okay, he has no registered party. However, he is a Libertarian. He was on 2020 and now he's on Fox Business, which if you do not know, is basically just Fox News' slightly smarter brother, who's in that weird rebellious phase. There are a bunch of libertarians, so I agree with them more than I do average conservatives. For instance, Stossel, I don't think has any issue with things like, gay marriage. Or, I forget whether or not he's pro-life, though, and that's something, it depends on the libertarian, typically. I've met some who are, some who aren't, and I can't say for sure whether or not he is. He is himself opposed to things like most war. He's opposed to the war on drugs. He's typically better. I remember, this is just straight from his Wikipedia page. He also opposes legal prohibitions against pornography, marijuana, recreational drugs, gambling, ticket scalping, prostitution, polygamy, homosexuality, and assisted suicide. And believes abortion should be legal. I agree with most of those. And I'm happy he also opposes corporate welfare and bailouts. Personally, in an economic issue, I prefer libertarians over Republicans, because typically they're also not hypocrites. Although I still don't like them very much. And I don't know how I feel about legalized ticket scalping, though. He's also talked in the past in somewhat favor of things like flat taxes, which I'm just downright against. However, here's his article attempting to debunk single-payer healthcare, which is just obviously ridiculous. Single-payer healthcare has been proven. I haven't read this yet. I'm doing a blind read of this for you guys. America needs single-payer healthcare, says progressives. And we do say that. That's a system where government pays doctors and hospitals. Actually, it depends on specifically what type of universal healthcare we're talking about. There are systems where the government just nationalizes all the hospitals. That's actually the system Hong Kong is on, I believe. No, wait, it's not Hong Kong. It's Singapore. That's on that system. Where basically everything is nationalized except the insurance. The insurance is private. There's also systems where the government just outright owns it. There's a system where the doctors are still private, they're paid for by the government. It's kind of weird, but that's basically the gist of it. And no sick person has to worry about having enough money to pay for care. After all, they say, healthcare is a right. A little nitpick, John, but you put healthcare is a right in quotations, then you put the word right in quotation. First off, you're supposed to use like the smaller quotations, like the one, pick one, you know the ones I'm talking about. When you're quoting something in a quote. And even then, you didn't close out the second quotation. So this entire article is apparently from that guy's point of view, who says healthcare is a right. Who pays for it? Asked Chris Pope. Who? Oh. A video game developer. Huh. But even then, the answer is we do. And then we take from it. This has been established. And that's really not a right question. Pope studied healthcare systems from the Manhattan Institute. In my newest video, oh yeah, he has a YouTube account too, forgot about that. Pope explains that although many Americans think that the Canadian and most European systems have single-payer systems, that's not really true. Okay, you have a fair point if you want to go into semantics. Then, yeah, tons of them don't have single-payer systems. Al Franken actually broke that down in Giant of the Senate about how pre-Obamacare, you were basically on 3 different plans, or you could be on 3 different plans if you were an American. In Germany, employers provide most of the health care, just as they do in the United States. Kind of misleading, but that's what happened, yeah. He says France and Switzerland also offer multiple options, public and private, which is what we're in favor of for the record. And most people buy private health insurance. That one I'm going to need a citation for. Some of the Swiss government subsidies are similar to those of Obamacare. But Canada, England, Norway, Cuba, of course he put in Cuba there, and a few other countries do have genuine single-payer systems. I'm constantly told that works well. People get good care and never have to worry about a bill. That's a little misleading, but okay, you're being somewhat misleading here, because we know people are paying for it. That's the people. We're paying for it through taxes. And we're actually saving $17 trillion over 10 years. You never mentioned that part. So yeah, there would be a bill. You just paid for it by living in the society. They spend less on healthcare and live longer. Pope says the claim is naive. May I just point out your appeal to authority is literally a video game developer. That's the only guy named Chris Pope I could find. Honest to God, when I looked up the name. They do live longer in those countries, but it's not because they get superior health care. You're right, John. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. It's because fewer of them are fat. Well, that's also because of better educational systems and more regulations, which is something you're against, John. Fewer car crashes. Citation, please. And they shoot each other less. Again, that's because of this thing called gun control, which you're against, John. Take out obesity, car accidents, and gun violence. The difference of life expectancy disappears entirely. This is a horrible argument. This is, okay, yeah, if you ignore the reasons people live longer, they don't live longer anymore. While we're at it, John, did you know that Mexico has a 0% crime rate? If we get rid of all of Mexico. Think about it. But I'm sorry, that argument just doesn't make any sense to me. Obesity could, for the record, be... And by the way, he had to put obesity in brackets. So I don't know if that's what the guy actually said. But obesity could actually be partly thanks to a healthcare system, but that's kind of nitpicky, I understand. But okay. Also, government-run systems save money by freeloading off American innovation. And you know where most of that innovation comes from, John? Universities. Not the private sector. Will universities stop existing the second we implement single payer? American drug companies no, that's just a lie, funded by American consumers and government subsidies. You forget about those government subsidies that you hate so much? There are tons of subsidies going to Big Pharma. I don't even know what this guy's talking about at this point. Fund most of the world's research and development of pharmaceuticals. New drugs and devices are expensive, so oftentimes in Britain, says Pope. This is also an appeal to authority. I haven't mentioned that yet. Whenever a new drug comes on the market that can save lives, the government just doesn't have the funds to pay for it. Well, again, this is one of the reasons why we're not against banning private insurance. If you want to try the experimental drugs, we're all for that. However, I at least think that there should be more proof of actual efficiency. And typically experimental drugs don't have that. Single-payer systems also save money by rationing care. Is that the free space on bingo yet? Hence the long waiting times for treatments declared non-essential in Canada, Britain, and for that matter, at the American Veterans Hospital. Okay, first off, what do you mean by treatments declared non-essential? I'll tell you what he means right now. Treatments that are non-essential. So yeah, if you want to have plastic surgery, you're going to have to wait a while. Because we would prefer to use our resources on someone who has cancer. What's the issue here, John? I, honest to God, do not see an issue with doing that. Do you just want work done of your own? You're worried you might have to wait. Your mustache is already beautiful enough. You don't need anything else, John, I promise. The VA's problems are similar to what happened in Britain's National Health Service. Yes and no. The main issue with the VA is we haven't really kept it up for, well, not even inflation, more the addition to veterans. Veterans have increased total about 30%. VA funding's only increased about 8%. The VA does absolutely need to be better, do not get me wrong. However, that doesn't mean that. It's not really even the fault of the VA. It's the fault of Congress not funding them, partly because of Republicans. In England, says Pope, rarely a week goes by without a crisis or another in a healthcare system being part of the news. Source, please. And do you mean local news? Because that happens all the time in the U.S., too. The U.S. is a big place, and so is the U.K. Of course stories are going to appear often. This one doctor screwed something up. This year, there was a crisis in emergency room care. People left in hallways for hours and hours. And there are no waiting rooms in the U.S., let me tell you that. Critics of the U.S. healthcare system say waiting lines is better than getting no care, which is what happens to Americans who cannot afford pay. But is that true? Is it true that people who have to wait to get health care are better off than people who just don't get anything at all? John, how old are you? This is the argument of a 3-year-old. If I have to wait, I might as well not have it. Pope points out that America already has, quote, over $1 trillion a year in public spending, really to provide health care to people who don't afford it. You mean, please tell me you mean can't. Also, the American emergency rooms treat anyone who comes in, and then they bill them, so it's still a largely privatized system. Medical debt is still the #1 cause of bankruptcy. But yeah, emergency rooms have to do the bare minimum to stabilize you. And you know what that means, by the way? That means that, say, your sugar gets too high, you can't afford to go to a doctor. You go to an emergency room, and they stabilize you. That's not a very good system. By contrast, single payer means taxpayer funds are spent on everyone and paid by everyone. Even people who can't afford to pay for their own care, they've already paid for it in taxes. That means there's less left for the truly needy. I thought you just said they were rationing for non-essential needs. Which one is it, John Stossel? Which one is it? The affluent often escape government's waiting list and treatments limited by buying private health insurance. In Britain, millions of people purchase private health insurance. At least they still have that option. In America, Senator Bernie Sanders says gleefully that he wants to put private health insurance companies out of business. Downright lie. He didn't say this. In fact, his single-payer bill included provisions allowing for private health insurance. Hearing that, Pope replied, makes you wonder whether this is more about spite than it is about improving people's health care. And this doesn't mean that the system in U.S. should stay as it is. Government already does too much here. People say America has free market health care, but we don't, and we haven't since World War II. Well, okay, where else are you going to go for free market examples? Otherwise, you're just masturbating, essentially. You're doing the political equivalent of masturbating. Government and government-subsidized health insurance companies currently spend most of America's health dollars. If politicians here really want to improve things, they should start by trying to let the market function. Let hospitals compete. We do. Right now, state laws won't even allow new private hospitals unless a regulation board, often made up of people affiliated with already existing hospitals, declare a need for a new one, and it's registered with the American Hospital Association. Let insurance companies compete for your business. American tax laws push workers to employer-funded coverage. Equalizing the tax law and more individuals would pick the coverage best suit for them. Pope says if we move towards a healthcare system where individuals were more responsible for shopping around, people could choose a better system. Yeah, that's never existed, and all the evidence points against you. This is probably the closest to a good single-payer debunking I've ever read. It's still not good, but it's the closest. At least he didn't rely on the old talking points and more just sort of preached ideology and kind of admitted that. Anyway, I'm Ephrom, and good night.